I hate the news. I really do. But I'm somehow addicted to it. I have to know what's going on in the world. I have to be updated. I want to find out what I'm missing around the world. Is there like some kind of war coming, or a kind of pork flu, or something coming at me from that I have to be prepared for, that I have to steel myself against, that I have to like get ready for, maybe dig a bunker. Fucking news, man. I hate the news, but I can't stop listening to it. This is a show about jewelry, why we wear it, why it matters, how it's made, and what it means. I'm Alex D, and I turn cannabis into gold. I make mind-blowing jewelry in gold, silver, and platinum from cannabis plants here in Canada for stage, screen, for people who want to rock crazy jewelry. I'm the Cannabis Goldsmith. I exaggerate, but not really. I listen to the news all the time. All day long I'm listening to the news. Many years ago, I was visiting a friend in Toronto. I noticed he didn't have a television. I said, "Where's your TV, dude? What happened to it?" "Oh, I cut the cord because it's just stupid." So I started realizing that cable TV was an absolute waste of money. Like, all I was getting was ads for the cable company. Like, it was mostly ads for the cable company, and I was paying them already. And I was thinking, what the fuck? Why am I paying them to advertise to me? That is stupid. And the shows were interrupted by ads, and it was just annoying. So I cut the cord years ago, and I haven't looked back. So I don't watch TV news, but I do listen to the news on podcasts. And I think I got that from my dad, R.I.P. He used to listen to radio news and get his news from shortwave radio. Now, he was a guy who worked for the United Nations, and we used to live in Africa, in various African countries. And in order to find out what was going on in the world, he had a shortwave radio. And the television there was hopeless, and this was before satellites. So you couldn't put a satellite dish in your backyard and get TV off a satellite because there was none. And in fact, even making phone calls back to Canada was hard from Africa. There would be a time delay. I mean, some of the older people will remember before satellite telecommunications, there was cables. And by the time the sound got to the other person on the other end, there was like a 2-3 second delay, and then you'd be talking on top of each other. And oh God, it was so hard to talk to the old man sometimes when I was in Canada and he was like in Central Africa or whatever. Just the delay, So how do you get radio that far away from Canada or the United States? Because he used to listen to the BBC, the World Service, all the time. If he could, he would listen to it on the hour. He would tune, if he was anywhere near radio, shortwave radio, he would tune it in, and you'd hear these as he would turn the knob to try and to focus on the BBC. And he'd lock into it, and you'd hear this BBC tune. And it would be this amazing kind of classical, imperial British tune, just a fantastic tune that would immediately let you know that you were listening to English news. Like some dude in England was actually recording this, and it was probably pretty good. So he'd listen to the World Service. And now this is something that I still do today, but I don't use the shortwave radio. I subscribe to the World Service as a podcast, and so every hour I get like a 2-3 minute bulletin of what's going on in the world. And this I've been listening to all the time. And I'm starting to think this might be a problem, the news. It's always depressing. It's mostly fake these days in my country, in Canada. It's like the news has been totally, journalism has been co-opted, basically, in my country by government regulation. Now, many, many journalists have lost their jobs, and the rest are now basically employed by the government of Canada with various grants and funds and stuff to produce journalism. And this, to me, doesn't sound right or feel right. And it taints the news product that they produce, in my opinion, in Canada. But anyway, back to the shortwave radio. My dad would be sitting there in the Congo or whatever with a shortwave radio with an antenna, and he would have to walk around the room until he hit a point where it was good, and then he'd tune it and he'd sit down and he'd listen really closely. And then we'd get the BBC. Sometimes we'd get the Voice of America, which was mostly at the time a propaganda channel that was the U.S. government was putting out to contrast with information coming from the Soviet Union, because there was basically a Cold War going on, and the Americans were using the Voice of America to broadcast propaganda, and the Russians were doing the same thing with their shortwave radio network, and I can't remember what it was called now, but sometimes you'd tune into a channel and it would sound like an American talking, but no, it was some dude in Russia with an American accent, and he was pretending to be an American, and he was broadcasting the news. Now, if you were living in the Congo or Gabon or some African country, and you weren't all up on where the channel was located, you might think this would be American news. And they used to go at each other in the shortwave space. It was just crazy. And if you were living in a third world country or in like some remote part of the world, listening to your homeland on shortwave radio, for some kind of tether to your homeland, you would get these weird channels, right? And then they would block each other, which was strange. They would you'd be listening to the BBC World Service, and all of a sudden it would be the Russians would be broadcasting, or the Soviets would be broadcasting like noise at that frequency to overwhelm the channel so that people couldn't hear the BBC or whatever. And I'm quite certain the Americans were doing it to the Soviets too. So it was always good when you finally tuned the dial and locked into the BBC or the CBC News in Canada. Sometimes we actually got the CBC, which to me was more amazing. Not to my father, mind you, but he liked the BBC better. He figured the news was better. But the CBC I liked because it was Canada, and this is where I was born, and I liked to hear my own countrymen talking on the radio, and so that's why I loved to hit the CBC. But we rarely got it back then. So anyway, that's shortwave radio, and shortwave radio is radio wave that travels farther than, say, FM radio in a car, or AM radio. Those are more line of sight radio waves that you need to be sort of located in the visual sight of the tower broadcasting the signal. But with shortwave, the waves are short and they bounce between the broadcast station and the ionosphere, and they bounce back down to Earth, and they sort of zigzag along between the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth, and that's what allows them to go the extra mile, so to speak, to go around the world even sometimes. I'd be listening to, all of a sudden you'd hear like something come in on the shortwave, and you'd hear somebody talking in a Chinese language, right? And then back it would just disappear, and just the waves bouncing between the Earth and the ionosphere. But that was radio back then. And that was a tether to the homeland for somebody living in a foreign country. Me living in a foreign country, wanting to hear a familiar voice. That was radio for me. And news, because if you were living somewhere else, you weren't getting the news locally because, the news was obviously not very good. So you had to find out what was going on in the world. So that's why you listened. And I guess that's why I listen today to the news. I tune in to the BBC sometimes every hour on the hour to find out what's going on ever since, I guess, the pandemic. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to disengage from that behavior because, frankly, I'm not learning anything new from each broadcast. God love you, BBC News or Associated Press News or whatever news. But I'm going to start weaning myself off news because, first off, I'm not learning anything new from it. And second off, I'm not sure it helps. I'm not sure it helps with the design that I'm doing, the art I'm doing. I think it might diminish the designs that I'm producing in some way, or it might prevent me from fully engaging in the designs because I'm worried about whatever's going on in the Middle East or in Europe or in Taiwan or whatever. So a lot of people, their demon is procrastination. Like I did a show on procrastination just recently. I have a bit of that, but the news is also a thing that I'm starting to reconsider. I've learned so much from the news, actually. I'm broadcasting to you now, I guess in a way, because I used to listen to the news as a kid, or in these various countries that I lived, I listened to the news, and now it's become a part of my life. Broadcasting. I'm broadcasting is what I'm doing here. It's radio in a way, I guess. But anyway, back to shortwave radio and news. I'm going to start weaning it out of my life. I still want to know what's going on, but I think I'm going to start wanting to know less what's going on, if I can manage that. It's going to be hard. Fuck. I had this girlfriend a number of years ago in Toronto, and she had this habit of, we'd wake up in the morning and she'd put on her radio, and I think the radio would wake her up. I mean, it was like a clock radio type thing, right? And it was tuned to the CBC World News. And this is how she would start her day. She would listen to the world news. I like this about her because I think it sort of reminded me of my dad a bit, maybe. But she listened to the world news, which was like a broadcast on CBC back then, and would cover all the big stories, much like the BBC World Service. And then that was it. And she wouldn't listen to news or watch news any other point during the day. She would just listen to it in the morning, and that would be it. And it wouldn't ruin her day, but it would give her an awareness of what was going on in the world. So I'm looking at her to emulate with this. Maybe that's what I should try and do. I should try and limit my news intake to get up in the morning, have a coffee, listen to the BBC World Service to find out what's going on in the world, and then don't listen to news or watch news at all for the rest of the day. Somebody once told me that news is going to find you. You don't have to go look for it. It'll come find you wherever you are. So if you're standing in the line at the supermarket and you haven't seen the news since this morning and something major has happened, no doubt the person behind you is going to tell you about it. Or they'll all be, everybody will be talking about it. It'll find you. The news will find you. So I have to start thinking about that. And the news is going to find me. So maybe I shouldn't be looking for it. So with so much diligence, shall we say. But anyway, the news in Canada is fucked. It's totally fucked. It's done. It's over. I don't trust the news here in Canada anymore. A lot of people don't because it's government now. It's all government funded, which kind of sucks. So the news, I'm going to be listen to less news, and I'm going to be more selective as to where I get it. What I used to do with news, my dad didn't do this, the person who taught me about news, but I would listen to news from various sources. So I would try and listen to, like, I'd go to the Reuters site, I go to the AP site, I go to BBC World, France 24, just a kind of a handful of news sites from different countries around the world. If I could find a German site, I would go in. Sometimes if there's a story in India, for example, I'll go in and look for the India papers and read the India papers to see what they're looking at. I understand most people don't take the news this seriously, but that's what I've done. This sounds like a confession, doesn't it? But it's not. This is who I am and what I'm trying to change in myself in order to move forward. Now, move forward creatively in new directions. So to do that, I'm going to eliminate the time I'm wasting having my brain filled with crap from news organizations that are most likely funded by governments. So that's something to think about. I want the creative stuff. I don't want the brainwashing. I want the creative stuff. That's what I want. I want documentaries. I want interesting visual things to look at. I want history about artists. That's what I want to learn. I don't want to learn about the news that hasn't changed since the last hour. Okay, that's enough. That's enough of news for about news. What am I working on? Well, I planted a tent. I've got 4 cannabis plants growing in a tent in the studio. Now, I started them a bit early, thinking that, I would, it was wishful thinking. I wanted to be growing earlier. I wanted to put them in the ground earlier, but in Canada, we can't do that because here it's April, the first week of April already, and there's going to be a big snowstorm later this afternoon. So we can't put tender plants outside until probably May. And now in the meantime, I've got this tent that's just filling up with leaves. So I've been picking leaves off these plants that I'm growing and modeling them and making them into product designs and thinking about product designs with the leaves. Now, these are the first leaves of the year that I've picked for our designs. And I got this amazing, it's crazy. This plant is only 16 inches tall, but it's produced this fat leaf, like just an enormous, like indica leaf. It's like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, holy shit, look at the size of that thing. It's almost as big as the plant itself. So I modeled that leaf and I want to make it into a belt buckle. So I've been working with plastic models of that giant leaf, that beautiful indica leaf. And I'll put a picture of it up in our Instagram stories and you'll see what it looks like. Or eventually it'll be on our website, tribe.ca. So if you want to see, if you ever want to reach me about jewelry, if you want us to make you something totally magnificent for stage, for screen, or just because you want to rock an amazing piece of jewelry made from the cannabis plant in precious metals, send me an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. And we'll start the process. We'll talk and we'll make you a piece that is absolutely amazing. But anyway, back to this indica leaf. So my first step was to thicken it up. Now leaves are thin. You can't cast them in precious metal because they're too thin. I need at least 1 millimeter in thickness to cast. And 1 millimeter in thickness is not what a leaf is. So I have to thicken it, yet keep the detail. And that's what the hard part of what I do here in the studio when converting these leaves into gold and silver and platinum. So I thickened up. I figured, I got a bunch of belt buckles. vintage stores and stuff. Over the years, I've collected a whole box of belt buckles that I can use as models to see how belt buckle mechanisms work, and I can measure them to see how big they go and all that kind of stuff. It's always good to have samples or examples of a design that you sort of want to work towards, because somebody's already done the work for you in the basic way, that you can just take some measurements and then add your own design to that. So that's how it works. So that way you get a standard belt loop and a standard belt pin that fits in the hole in the belt buckle and that kind of thing, right? So I got this huge leaf. It's long. It's wide and long, and it might be too wide for a belt buckle. It might be too wide for a belt buckle to wear every day. I don't know. But if you could, it's freaking amazing. It's like 6 inches by 2 inches. Like a leaf, 6 inches long by 2 inches thick, and a belt underneath it, like in silver. I'm thinking, fuck, this is going to be just an amazing belt buckle. This is going to be just incredible. So all the details on this leaf too, right? So that's going to be on the face of the belt buckle. And then on the back, the mechanisms, the pin and the loop and all that, I'm designing those special for this. So there'll be leaf like loops and like cannabis seed loops, and it'll be all related to cannabis on the back too of the belt buckle, even though that's not visible to somebody who's looking at you wearing the belt buckle. You'll know it's there. I'll know it's there, but no one else is going to see it because it'll be on the inside. But on the outside will be this amazing indica leaf. That's just it's sick. So anyway, I thicken it up to, I guess, maybe 2 millimeters. I thought, jewelers are always battling against weight. It's always nice to make something a bit thicker because it'll last longer. But with that comes weight. And with belt buckles, there may be a weight ceiling for a belt buckle you would wear every day. There might be, a belt buckle might be too heavy to wear every day is what I'm saying. So this is going to be an experiment to see if it's wearable, if I can, I can certainly design and produce this belt buckle, but the thing is, will it be wearable? And if it's wearable, God, this is going to be an amazing buckle. Now, what if it doesn't work? Okay. What if I can't use the whole leaf because it's too wide? What I'll do is cut it in half and use just the tip for the belt buckle, half the leaf tip. That's another option. So I've been designing that as well. So I'm working with 2 versions of the same design, a half leaf and a full leaf as belt buckles. One of them is going to work. I'm working them in plastic, kind of a plastic resin right now. I've made prototypes, and I'm going to thread that on a belt. I mean, it won't be very strong, but at least I'll be able to decide if it actually works to close a belt before I start doing any, before I reach out to our master Goldsmith in Toronto and get him to work his magic on this belt buckle and turn it into silver. So this is the belt buckle thing I'm working on. And I have to tell you that working with nature or plants or whatever, or art, is the antidote to news, I think. I think it's the cure for news, is to get people more in touch with real things, right? Not things that are meant to change our minds. Anyway, yeah. Oh, one more thing I'm working on. I'm always thinking of how to make jewelry, take jewelry into other areas, okay? Other areas where jewelry isn't worn, right, normally, or where people don't think jewelry is. And this is why I'm working on this turntable weight thing for a platter weight for turntables. And this is why I'm always looking for ways to broaden the way people think about jewelry. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm making this belt buckle. Like what I have this big carabiner thing that I carry my keys. I have my keys on this like mountain climbing freaking thing, right? And I attach it to my belt. And this way I don't lose my keys. I keep them close by. So I'm thinking, why don't I make a belt loop out of sterling silver, a cannabis leaf belt loop that fits on your belt, on any belt. It's a piece of jewelry for your belt. But at the bottom, there'll be a loop you'll be able to hook your keys into. And I'm thinking, this is what I need for my keys. Because I'm always like, I don't want to hook it on the belt, the cotton belt loop on your jeans, because that'll rip and you'll lose your keys, right? So you want a nice metal sterling silver belt loop with kind of a hook thing that you can hook your keys into and take them off quickly. Also, this belt loop that I've designed here that I'm working on today, you'll be able to use it if you have a dress belt, for example, and you want to wear chains or watch fob chainy type things. You'll be able to hook chains onto it. Like, it'll be interesting to use as a dress thing. Or you can wear two, like one on each side of the front of your pants where a pleat used to go in the olden days, and then run a chain between them both. If you wanna look biker gangy kind of porn star, or just a simple, just leave it on the belt. Like I'm thinking this is what a great idea this is. And it's something that a guy can wear, that you can gift to a guy, that a guy can put on his belt and forget about it. And just like, even if he doesn't have keys, I'm thinking of making a couple of just leaves, decorative leaves for belts. Like this is another way to wear jewelry, right? It's just a little something that you can differentiate yourself from another dude wearing a belt. You're wearing a belt with a cannabis leaf and sterling silver, like a loop on it, and it's going to look amazing. Already, I can tell. So like, the last few days, I've been deep into modeling and thickening leaves up and running tests. And today I'll have a buckle to test on an actual leather belt. So I'm looking forward to that, to see how it works. I'm working on the half leaf, and then later today I'll finish the full leaf and to see if it's actually too long to wear on a belt. If it isn't, it's going to be an amazing belt buckle. Somebody's already interested in it. One of our customers is already interested in it, to see if it works out, which is great because you can watch how we work. And if you're interested in getting us to make a piece for you, just contact me and we'll make it happen. We ship our products all over the world. So if you want an amazing piece of jewelry, something different, something that will last and has a cannabis vibe to it, but is made of solid precious metal, contact me. Anyway, that's it. Sorry about the rant about the news. I'm going to start thinking about how I can disconnect from the news. I'm going to try and emulate that girlfriend that I had. Maybe a morning news, or maybe I'll start weaning myself off. Maybe I'll work on listening to less news broadcasts a day, and I'll start diminishing the number until I get it quite low. The great thing is you can change your life if you want to. It's not that hard. So it's just a habit that I have to change, the news habit. Get out of the news habit, and it will free up more time to do more amazing designs. All right, that's it. I'm gonna go out into the woodshed now and chop some wood to get ready for the big snowstorm that's supposed to hit later on today. Thanks for listening to the Cannabis Goldsmith. Hey, tell your artist friends about the Cannabis Goldsmith, because artists like listening to each other talk about their process and the shit they're doing and what they're going through. So if you know someone who's a potter, a painter, a jewelry maker, tell them about this podcast and get them to subscribe, and maybe it'll help. The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. You can see what we do at tribe.ca. Send us an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith.